All right. Says on the YouTube video, Clem waiting for Anne Rainwater. Okay, so I think we are live. Welcome everyone to the October edition of the Vernon Salon series. I'm very pleased tonight to present Lindsay Merbaum, who is a writer coming to us from Michigan. She will be doing a variety of things. You might notice I'm in a new spot. Normally I'm by the piano. She will be guiding us through a cocktail tonight of her own making. And she will also be reading part of her new feminist horror book. It was called The Hotel. It now has a new title, The Gold Persimmon, and she will talk about more of that on the way. And then at the end, we have a Q&A. Like normal. So what you'll see if you're tuning in on YouTube there is the little chat on the sidebar, and I'll be monitoring that throughout the evening while Lindsay's talking. And during the Q&A, you can feel free to post some questions, comments, etc. Just a housekeeping thing with that's new. If you would like your comment to be anonymous, if you would like me to not say your name, go ahead and say that in the chat. Or if you'd like me to say, oh, this is from so-and-so, please let me know that too. So we are coming to you from the Vernon Salon series. This is a series that I founded about 4.5 years ago, January 2016, and it's a monthly series. The mission is to bring art to the community in a friendly, informal setting that encourages conversation, encourages new friendships, and I've met some really wonderful people along the way. I was fortunate to hear Lindsay speak at one of the salons in spring of 2017, so she's been on this before. And if you have any questions about the salon, go ahead, feel free to ask me in the chat too, or just send me an email through my website. You will also see on your link in the box for this screen, link on the bottom for donations. And this is for this evening to help support Lindsay and to help keep this series going. So please donate generously of your either way, PayPal or Venmo. And again, the questions about that, go feel free to ask me in the chat as well. I want to read Lindsay's official bio here that she sent me just earlier, so you all can get a good picture of her. Lindsay Merbaum is a queer feminist writer and high priestess of homemade cocktails. Her stories, essays, and reviews have appeared in Pank, The Ecologist, Zank Books, Best of the Web, Electric Literature, Reductress, The Rumpus, and Bitch Magazine, among others. In addition, Lindsay serves as a fiction editor at Rivet, Writing That Risks, and recently signed on as book reviews editor at Necessary Fiction. Her debut novel, The Gold Persimmon, will be released or unleashed from Creature Publishing in the fall of 2021. So without further ado, as I sign the main screen over to Lindsay right now. Here you go. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Anne. It's really awesome to be back with the Vernon Salon series. Thank you so much for having me. I'd like to give a special shout out to my publishers at Creature Publishing and my agent, Kate Garrick. You guys are awesome, and thank you so much for being with us tonight. So as Anne mentioned, I'm gonna demo a little cocktail for you. For those who know me well, I'm a pretty passionate mixologist, home bartender, high priestess of cocktails, whatever you want to call it. And I love to do theme drinks for various workshops I've given, or in honor of figures like RBG and AOC. I made a cocktail called the Fucking Bitch for AOC. You can go to my Instagram to find out more about that. It's actually very refreshing and contains sage for wisdom. So when I found out my book was getting published at this amazing house, I had to make a cocktail in honor of it. And at that time, the book was called The Hotel. In fact, the book has had many different titles over the years, but I decided to choose a key element from the book, which is the Gold Persimmon Hotel, which exists in the book, and kind of use that as my inspiration for a cocktail, which is a sort of interesting experiment and a kind of synesthesia to try to represent via taste the experience of reading something. So I'm going to guide you guys through this first. We'll have our boozy time and then our story time, so you can sip and drink and relax and listen to a unsettling feminist horror story. And just to walk you through it, first I'm going to introduce you to all my tools and my ingredients. So first thing you need for a cocktail such as this is a shaker of some sort, which hopefully comes with a strainer. If not, no worry. A really easy substitute for a strainer is a glass jar. I admit that I spent a couple years using a glass jar as a shaker because it just works so well. The glass really breaks up the ice, and you can use the lid to strain it. In addition to measure out our ingredients, we're going to need what this guy is called as a jigger, and the other side is a half jigger. A jigger holds 44 milliliters of liquid, or 1.5 ounces, which is about the same as the average shot glass, like my skull friend here. So if you don't have a measuring cup that measures that low quantities, if you don't have, jiggers, don't worry about it. You can use a shot glass. We're also going to use our mini jigger, which is called a pony. This one holds about 20 milliliters of liquid, and it's going to be really useful for us later on. In addition, I've got a couple toothpicks. These are for our garnish. And of course, you need a glass of some sort. Okay, piece of cake. Next, let's take a look at our ingredients. So the base of this cocktail is bourbon. I'm using the Spirit of Detroit Grass Widow Bourbon Whiskey. So go Michigan. I chose this because it has kind of a spicy warmth to it, which is a really good base. And then we're also going to add mezcal to this drink as well. I chose this because mezcal is known for its real smoky flavor, and smoke and fog are actually a theme within the book, as you'll hear about soon. We're also going to be using some ginger shrub. If you're not familiar with shrub is basically a vinegar base combined with a little bit of sugar and some kind of flavor. In this case, it's ginger, which is a little bit spicy and helps bring out some of the warmth in our bourbon. A possible substitute for shrub could be apple cider vinegar. That can work in some cocktails, but in this case, we're not going to use a ton of this, which means using just a little bit. We also have our Earl Grey tea. Hopefully you steep this in advance. We're not making a hot toddy, so don't pour hot tea into this cocktail. If you don't have Earl Grey but have another strong black tea, that could also work too. And then my jewel here, the hibiscus syrup. This looks like blood, and I find that kind of amazing and fun. I chose it definitely for the red color. Red and gold are color themes within the book. Also because hibiscus is a nice floral that has a really mild flavor. On its own, it's kind of sour if you've ever had hibiscus tea, but made into a syrup, it's quite sweet. So we're going to use just a little bit of this at a time so that we don't overpower our cocktail. I don't know if you guys made any of this yourself at home, but I, in addition to citrus and ginger, put cinnamon in mine and some clove as well. So we get some really nice flavors that also pair well with our bourbon, with our tea, and really help create a smooth finish. And then last but not least, our bitters. I love bitters. What's wonderful about them is they're not really for taste. The purpose of bitters is really for smell. I'm going to be using what are called tobacco bitters, but it doesn't actually contain any tobacco leaves. What's in this is actually vanilla, cardamom, and clove, which again, we get that nice spiciness. If you have just classic aromatic bitters, awesome, that's going to work great as well. Now, if you don't really have a lot of these ingredients, that's not a problem. I would say a really good base for a drink, even if you don't have everything, would be the alcohol, obviously, the tea, and the syrup. Most drinks are some combination of obviously alcohol, something a little bit sweet, and something a little bit sour or bitter. Okay, so, and we also are going to have our ice, of course. And then last but not least, we have these dried persimmon slices for our garnish and some edible gold leaf. Obviously, this is a very bougie cocktail, but I think that my novel deserves it. And this gold leaf, it is very fiddly and a little bit hard to work with, but the good news about it is that it's so pretty that no matter what you do, you kind of can't mess it up. All right, so first things first, take out your shaker if you got it, or your jar, and we're gonna drop our ice in there. So if you have just one large cube or sphere, that works. A couple ice cubes also work. We're using this ice to dilute the alcohol a little bit and help mix the flavors. Next, we're gonna use our bourbon, and we're going to do a full jigger or a full shot of bourbon. Now, if some of you really don't like bourbon but prefer mezcal, go with that. If you don't like mezcal and you just want to use the bourbon, that is also okay. So we're going to pour that out. Lovely. Okay, I'm done with that. And next, we're going to add half a jigger of mezcal. So we're adding half a shot of mezcal. Mezcal has a pretty strong flavor. And to kind of balance it out. Next, we're going to add a full jigger, a full shot of our Earl Grey tea. Okay. Making our potions. And next, let's go with our gorgeous hibiscus syrup. If you have some of this left over at home, it's lovely to make sodas with. You could use it with baked goods and other things. It's a really nice thing to have. And now we're going to break out our little pony. My little pony, oh gosh. I'm not going to use too much of this because even though I'm using just a little pony, a little really goes a long way here. Also, if you are using both the syrup and the shrub, you really want to be careful to not use too much of either, because believe it or not, the vinegar in the shrub will bring out the sugars in the syrup more. So if you're only using the syrup, you might be able to use a little bit more in the end, but if you're using both, tread cautiously. So I'm gonna go do about half the pony, so about 10 milliliters of the syrup. And we're gonna get a really nice kind of red golden color in our cocktail from this. And later on, of course, you're always welcome to taste it. And if you want it sweeter, add more sweet. If not, no worries. You can also add more alcohol to balance it out. I'm going to shake up my ginger shrub. And now I would recommend adding 1/2 to 3/4 of a pony of your shrub. Now again, because I used my syrup as well, I'm going to go with about 1/2 because I don't want to use too much and overpower the flavors of my drink. A sweet cocktail should be intended to be sweet, not necessarily sweet by accident. And last but not least, I'm going to actually add my bitters right in here. I'm only going to do a couple dashes. That's the great thing about bitters. They smell wonderful, but they are actually bitter. I've had the cap fall off and basically the whole bottle went in and, well, it tasted awful. Okay, now we're ready to put the top on or close the lid of our jar, and we're going to shake. How long do you shake the cocktail? It honestly depends on what kind of cocktail you're making. If you're making something really milky or frothy like a gin fizz, I would shake it for a full minute. In this case, we're really just mixing everything up. We want to break up the ice a little bit to just kind of dilute some of the alcohol. So about, 10, 15 seconds should be pretty good.
How do you convey that in writing?
Everyone count to yourself. Okay. And when you're done, I recommend, if you've still got your shot glass handy, you have a little taste and see what you think. Ooh, came out really red. Look at that. Oh, that's perfect. Okay, mine came out great. I hope your guys is also It's tasting really good. If you're feeling a little off about the taste, for example, if you didn't have all the ingredients or maybe a little more or a little less of something went into it, now's the time to doctor it a little bit. Add a little more sweet or add a little more alcohol. But if you're feeling good about it and you're liking it, then go ahead and pour it into your glass. And I will tell you that I got this beautiful cocktail glass from Goodwill in California. Excellent place to look for glassware. And I'm just gonna set that aside. Woo, very full pour. Okay. Now, for some of you who may be done at this point, I don't know if everyone has the ingredients for the garnish, but regardless, let me show you how to do this because it's actually really easy and fun. So since the book is called The Gold Persimmon, the cocktail is called The Gold Persimmon, I had to have a persimmon garnish. And what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna take out my gold leaf and my toothpicks. And first I'm gonna take one toothpick and I'm going to pierce the center of the dried persimmon just enough so that my finger feels the toothpick coming through on the other side, but it doesn't completely spear it. Okay, and this holds it up perfectly for me so I can work with it. And also then I'll be able to stick it in the glass and have it balanced. Here comes the fiddly part, as they say on the Great British Baking Show. I'm gonna grab a little chunk of this. And you can see already how it kind of hangs. It's very, very light. It's like cotton candy, just sort of like disappears. And I'm just gonna kind of spread it out over one side of my persimmon, just to make it stick to the grains of the fruit. You see that? You guys, I don't know if you guys, how well you guys can see that. Just got a little bit more. Oh my God, it's gorgeous. Okay. And now to hold up the garnish in the cocktail, I'll just drop it right into the glass. Depending on the size of the persimmon slice, you may have to shorten the toothpick a little bit so that it doesn't fall over. But in this case, ooh, it's balanced perfectly. When I first tried to do this, I tried to glue the persimmon to the glass with sugar. I melted it down and tried to get it to harden, and that did not work out. But toothpicks work. Also, they sell little tiny clothespins that you can use to clip a garnish to the side of your glass. All right, so hopefully everyone has completed their drink by now and is satisfied with what they've got. I'm gonna set aside my stuff over here for a sec. And voila, here it is. So now we can sip. And cheers. Cheers, everybody. Ooh, that's good. Okay. All right, so now we've had our boozy time. Relax and enjoy. You can close your eyes if you'd like, as I'm very, very excited to share with you the first chapter of my novel. So just to give you guys a little bit of insight and a little background into what this book is about, let me share the synopsis with you. Clytemnestra is the faithful high priestess of check-in at the Gold Persimmon, an opulent New York City hotel where guests seek catharsis in complete solitude, sometimes at their own peril. Harboring painful secrets about her past and her eccentric parents, Cly lives isolated in her own reality until a forbidden affair with a troubled guest threatens the world she's constructed and forces her to see the Gold Persimmon for what it really is. In a parallel reality, an inexplicable fog descends on the city, trapping 7 people in an upscale sex hotel called the Red Orchid. Among them is a young, non-binary writer searching for inspiration for their own novel. Haunted by specters of grief and familial shame, Jamie soon finds themselves and their companions trapped in a waking nightmare that pits the survivors against each other as chaos morphs into horror. There we go. All right. So I'd now like to just dive into reading the first chapter for you, and also share with you that you guys are the first audience to get a sneak preview of this book, which is coming out next fall from Preacher Publishing. So here we go. Part 1, Chapter 1. The lobby is cool and quiet as a tomb. The only sound, the soft burble of the fountain behind the desk. A hunk of stone with a ripple of shimmer coursing through it like a silver strand of hair. A spring pouring forth from the head, washing over the persimmon tree carved into the rock face. Green moss and tiny white flowers hide in the crevices. The orchids shiver. Cly stands behind the desk with her hands on the poreless granite, caressing the stone. The world outside is one of car horns, garbage, cell phone chatter, the obscenity of roaring trucks, the boom and clank of construction. Inside, this is her world. When guests arrive one at a time, she studies their faces as they cross the threshold. Some of them tremble. Others smile with obvious relief, float up to the check-in desk. Welcome, Cly says, and means it. A sleek black name tag is pinned to her cream blouse, just above her breast. Her long black hair, wavy, almost curly, is pulled back in a gold clip. She wears simple gold earrings and a matching pendant in the shape of a persimmon tree around her neck. On her desk, there's a glass bowl of persimmons. She offers one to each guest. The fruit will never go out of season. It's grown especially for the hotel in a greenhouse somewhere. There are people who come here so their former selves can die, so they can transform into something else. Sometimes when guests return to the lobby to check out after their stay, Cly does not recognize them. Their faces are the same, yet not. Once in a while, someone's hair goes white. Cly doesn't know what exactly happens in those rooms because it is not her business to know. Even the guests themselves probably couldn't explain it. But she does know something about solitude, about a quiet that can be deafening. She is the priestess offering safe passage. When Edith arrives, Cly notes her jaunty little walk, her stylish leather jacket. She smirks and simpers. The first to survey the lobby with such obvious self-satisfaction, savoring the sight of each object, the orchids, the plush couches no one ever sits on, the fountain, even Cly herself, and finding a secret pleasure in it all. When Edith reaches the desk, hands stuffed in her pockets, she looks Cly right in the eye and smiles. She says hi, slowly, with great purpose, the word accompanied by that smirk, teeth gleaming. Her voice is too loud. Cly winces. Welcome, she says, but this time she does not mean it, not exactly. What she means to say is, are you sure this is where you're supposed to be? Edith looks around again. She has no luggage, just a backpack slung over one shoulder. She tosses her head and her short, fine hair falls into her eyes. Then she brushes it away. It's light brown, almost blonde, with strands of silver. Her eyes, blue-gray, are framed by tentative quotation marks. Cly thinks she looks younger than she really is. There are at least 10 years between them. As Cly brings up her reservation on the computer, Edith plucks a persimmon from the bowl and casually rolls it around in her hands. Finally, it's time for the presentation of the key. Cly offers Edith the shining black card in her cupped palms, the way she's been taught to do, the way she's always done it. Edith arches an eyebrow. Really? Cly nods. Okay then. She takes the key, allows her finger to graze Cly's palm. It's full of electricity. Zip. You want to be down here for a while? Cly pulls at her shirt, composing herself. Yes, ma'am, until 1 o'clock. Edith smirks at her again for saying ma'am. Then she glances at her name tag. Well, if you want some company, you know where to find me, Clytemnestra. She pronounces her full name like an inside joke. With that, she saunters off towards the gilded elevator, where an attendant awaits to shuttle her to her room. She hums to herself as she goes, tosses the persimmon in the air. She catches it, throws it again. A prince with a golden bauble. The next day, Cly finds on her desk a small piece of heavy cream stationery folded in half. She knows who's left it, but she plays coy with herself and pretends she doesn't. Her hands tremble as she unfolds the paper to sneak a peek. Then she secrets it away in her pocket. The note contains no words of flattery, no poetry or little jokes. In fact, there are no words at all, just a phone number in neat block letters. Such delicious arrogance, her mother might say. After her shift ends, Cly goes home and sinks into the tub. She closes her eyes, feels again the guest's finger, Edith's, grazing her palm. In spite of herself, she imagines Edith's hands on her body, grasping, pawing. The scene is startling. Cly opens the tap to disguise the sound of the water sloshing with the movement of her hips. Sometimes she ducks under. Even submerged, holding her breath, she can still taste her mother's cigarettes. What would it be like to experience everything like this? The sound of the world flattened and distorted, rendered distant yet incredibly close. Cly imagines drifting up out of her body, floating through the bathroom doorway, then to the right toward the kitchen. There on the table, she sees her mother's notebook full of poetry she never lets anyone look at. Meanwhile, her father paces, muttering lectures to the pigeons on the windowsill. Her parents no longer sleep. They're alert, monitoring her comings and goings, waiting for her when she gets home, no matter the hour. All their friends drifted away years ago. Their own parents are dead in countries they will never see again. If Cly had the money, she would have sent them a long time ago to crumbling Mediterranean villa. They would wear dark sunglasses, her mother an enormous hat, and languorously smoke long, skitty cigarettes as they lay in the shade, dying slowly in the crepuscule like old world vampires, while a servant force-fed them overripe fruit. How can you work at such a place, a hotel? Her mother, the famed poetess, says over and over, spitting the words, as if Cly is a chambermaid cleaning toilets. It doesn't matter to Claire that only the best are selected for check-in. Cly knows that working at a hotel isn't really what her mother objects to anyway. That she herself in her youth once cleaned houses and wore the same clothes every day so she could afford to drink espresso and write poetry all night. The rules at the Gold Persimmon are what Claire can never understand or approve of. The Gold Persimmon is a precisely ordered world full of musts and mustn'ts. Guests arrive at their appointed check-in desk at the mandated time, then are ushered to their cocoons for the night. They will never be encroached upon by a waiter bearing a tray, never cross paths with housekeeping's cumbersome cart in the hallway. Claire is a woman who makes a scene at every opportunity. She much prefers chaos. All the privacy measures created a great deal of buzz when the hotel first opened. Wellness influencers and Western Buddhists penned op-eds, while magazines, newspapers, and travel sites published profiles suggesting big-name celebrities and politicians were booking rooms to grieve their divorces and lost campaigns in style. But Cly has never seen a face she recognizes. The writers who produced those articles seem to miss the point entirely. Discretion is not the purpose of the hotel. The purpose of the hotel requires discretion. There are rumors there are cameras installed in some of the rooms. Alone at night, the other check-in girls grow bored, uneasy. It feels like there's always someone looking over your shoulder, they say. They also claim a phantom woman runs naked through the hall on the 9th floor, the one conveniently closed for renovations. How do they know if no one goes up there? The accident didn't occur on the 9th floor, but the 20th. The official story, a guest fell out a window. Unofficially, a guest became intoxicated in his room, then threw himself out the window. When it happened, Cly was at her post awaiting the next guest, who wasn't due for another hour. The bowl of persimmons gleamed atop the desk. The rock fountain behind her shed water. The white moth orchids nodded to each other in the circulated air. She scrolled through the day's reservations, each name as precious as a secret. Then a boom, followed by a car alarm. The lobbies, unlike the rooms, were padded but not soundproof. Cly assumed there had been a car accident on the street. She stared straight ahead at the tinted glass doors and waited for something to happen, for someone to come running in. But more shouts were followed by a scream. She rushed outside. The body had landed on the car and the roof of the vehicle was crushed. Cly found herself standing right in front of it, though she didn't know how she'd gotten so close. The alarm whooped. She saw hair, dark hair. It was wet. There was blood on what remained of the windshield, deep in the cracks. It looked like a stained glass window had shattered. Behind her, Duke was losing it, screaming at everyone to stay calm. Someone was crying. Sirens sounded in the distance. Cly looked and looked. She couldn't stop. The crushed roof of the car, the windshield in pieces on the ground like shattered quartz. The back of the man's head, the hair curly, thick with black blood. His hand dangling, fingernails immaculate. The shoe on the pavement, several feet away. It was a tennis shoe, still clean and white, the kind her father would wear to go for a walk. All right, everybody, all right. Duke motioned for them to follow him away from the car. The paramedics had arrived. This is a terrible thing, yes, but don't forget, we've still got people upstairs who have no idea what's happened, and they're going to need to be taken care of. Get back to your stations, try to keep it together, and I'll tell you what to do as soon as I know what the fuck we're going to do, okay? No one said anything. The crying woman continued sobbing. For Christ's sakes, get her out of here. Somebody call a sub. The police arrived. Fuck, Duke said when he saw them. Okay, people, let's go. We've got work to do, and nobody talks to the fucking press. The reporters showed up later, crowding the lobbies, talking too loudly, sullying the floor with their shoes and spilled coffee, forcing Duke to rush around, herding them out of the building before any of the guests saw them. They were hoping the body belonged to someone famous, but his name wasn't one anyone had heard before. Cly stood there. She regarded the glass, the blood on the ground, the pristine shoe, the hand. The fingers curled as if something had fallen from its grasp. She tugged at her eyelashes. Come on, people, move, Duke shouted. He was flushed and sweating. Cly shivered, but didn't think to close her arms across her chest, so they hung unused at her sides as she slowly walked back to her desk. The others drifted this way and that around her, meandering toward their respective entrances. The story was all over the news, yet no one spoke to the press. Cly knows it wasn't so much out of loyalty to the hotel as pity for the guest. He'd lost a child, it turned out. They called it the accident to refer both to the man himself and what happened to him. Clytemnestra heard that Duke went to the funeral. The staff were talking then to anyone they could find, even Cly. They were afflicted with a kind of compulsive chattiness. Their hands shook. Afterwards, the hotel closed for renovations. Windows were installed that couldn't be opened or broken. Alcohol was also made unavailable. Meanwhile, Cly took on an office temp job and bided her time, making copies and spreadsheets, fiddling with paper clips and rubber bands at her cubicle. Other Gold Persimmon employees found permanent jobs elsewhere with fewer protocols and risks. But Cly went back. How can you go back? Her mother wanted to know. It was not a question she'd ever considered. Of course she would return to faithfully execute her duties. There was no other path. When they reopened after the renovations, demand surpassed what it had been before the accident. Duke was pleased, though in those first few weeks, he darted about, dark circles of sweat staining his shirt. All the returning staff were on edge, on the lookout for something, they didn't know what. An emergency team, exclusive to the hotel, remained on standby in case of incident. The bathwater is bluish with soap, a thin, creamy film of bubbles on top. Cly skims it off with her arms, and there she is beneath the water, her own legs, dark pubis. As she moves, the body follows. She stands at the sink and wipes the fog off the mirror, peers at the head inside with black hair, a face that matches her own. The old fantasy unravels itself wordlessly, pulling her into the myth of the second skin, the one she knows by heart. Already she's breathing hard. The heat of the steam has softened the glass to gelatin. The mirror's face emerges, glistening like a birth. She's smiling. They stand lip to lip. Cly's nipples are hard. Her double is smooth and slick as water. She rubs palms, slides her wet fingers. Cly moans. She is alive, alive. This is real. Her hip bones collide against the heavy edge of the sink as the reflection goes black. A portal, it swallows her whole. When she's finished, there's a scratch along the edge of her lower lip, a line of blood, like lipstick applied with impossible precision. The mirror is sharp. Cly falls asleep in her robe, her hair damp on the pillow. Tonight, she will have the dream again, the one where she's working check-in D. The lobby is dark, cold and moist as a cave. She sees a figure pass through the door, then come toward her, but she can't make out his face. He moves haltingly, dragging one half of his body. Slowly, he labors towards the desk where she waits with her hands folded as if in prayer. The desk is ivory. Cly notes one of the man's arms hangs loose at his side. His leg is twisted, the knee inverted. His face is smashed, the eyes drooping from the sockets, the skin torn away like a peeled peach, his teeth whitish nubs protruding from his gums. Good afternoon, Cly says. What is your name? The man's mouth opens and his lower jaw drops to the floor. We'll get someone to clean that up for you. She taps her fingers against the desk. There is no computer. Let me locate your reservation. One moment. The man's loose arm falls off, tearing his shirt at the shoulder. Cly continues tapping her fingers on the desk, yellowed as old bone. It is bone, she realizes, hundreds of bones sanded together. It's no use. She won't be able to find the reservation. She doesn't have access. No matter, she says, and heads toward the elevator, motioning for the guests to follow her. His one working leg drags his body after her. The door is made of slate. It opens onto a narrow, black cavern. In there, Cly says. The man hobbles toward the edge. He looks back at her for a moment. His face appears intact, recognizable, full of familiar sorrows. She gasps just as he drops down into the abyss. Thank you.
All right. Lindsay, that was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your book. I think I am on the stream. I'm just double checking. Yep.
I'm ready for questions.
With my pet crew. All right. So everybody listening now, who's on the YouTube stream, do you have any questions for Lindsay about her book, about her, about her process? Please feel free to type them in, and I'll relay it to Lindsay. And in the meantime, while we're waiting for that, Lindsay, maybe you could talk about when you started work on your book, your process, throughout this time period, and anything you want to tell us about it.
Oh my goodness. I had this idea like 10 years ago. This thing popped into my mind, a hotel to cry in. I've always loved hotels. They kind of fascinate me, all the potential for secrets. And I had this concept, but the problem was I didn't know how to make something happen with it. If you have a bunch of characters locked away in rooms, not talking to each other in a hotel, it's difficult to create a story out of that. So I actually initially had all these characters who were in the hotel and I wrote stories about, which later became some short stories. And that really didn't go anywhere. But Clytemnestra was there from the beginning. From the beginning, there was staff working at the hotel. And then somewhere along the way, I don't know exactly what happened, but I kind of got this idea for a parallel situation. And there's a second hotel within the book. And there's a sort of mirroring effect that takes place. And it's honestly true that I don't entirely even remember how I came up with some of this stuff. But what I will say was that for years, it felt like I was trying to solve a puzzle. I couldn't figure out, like, how does this story fit together? Like, how do I make this happen? And how do I get these different pieces together? Mm-hmm. And the book is considered sort of experimental in the sense that it's unusually structured. It's an unusual kind of dual narrative. And there's a secret tie as to how those narratives are connected that I will not spoil for you guys.
Okay.
But it was honestly one of the hardest things I've ever tried to write, because of that sort of element of being like lost in a maze myself of how do I make this into a story that works. So that took, so when I started writing, it took maybe 5-7 years, something like that. It took a long time. It took a long time to get it all together.
Cool. Oh wow, we have a lot of people posting that they can't believe they have to wait a year to hear the rest of the book. They're saying, "Oh, it's a cliffhanger right now."
No, it is an early sneak peek. But I will say this: that even though the book won't come out until next fall, there will be pre-orders before that happens. And for those who don't know, pre-ordering books is actually a really great way to support the author and their press. The success of a book does, in one small part, hinge on pre-orders. So I will be sharing that information with everyone who is here tonight as soon as I have it available. And also there will be more events, of course, for me to read this work. There'll be a book launch party. I don't know if it will be virtual or in person because that really depends on what happens between now and then. But it shows us the advantage of the virtual, which is that we've got people tuning in from all over and we don't have to be in the same place. And also this will be on YouTube for all eternity. So
yeah. Wonderful. Let me scroll over to here to see if anybody has any questions. It doesn't look like any
cocktails too.
Sorry, go ahead.
How did your cocktail turn out? Was it okay?
Perfect. I think I didn't have a jigger. I had a 1 and 2 ounce measure. So I approximated a bit, and I think I erred on the side of not quite sweet enough. So I added more syrup.
I mean, that's the way to go because you got to keep adding more and more alcohol. And already this is a strong drink. So just like my fiction.
Right.
So yeah, it's always best to start with a little and then add more. Same as when you're cooking. If you want to make it sweeter.
Oh, we do have some questions coming in, Lindsay. Here we go. From someone here. Fantastic premise, Linz. What was the impetus for the original first bits of writing set in this locale? Was it a personal experience or the image of a hotel or some other sensory trigger? Cool.
Yeah, so I mean, the overall setting, which also features prominently in the book, is New York City, where I used to live. And I haven't lived there for a long time, but for some reason it keeps popping up in my fiction. It's kind of a fascinating place. Yeah, I've always had a really strong interest in hotels. And also the other hotel featured in the book is a sex hotel, which is modeled after the Japanese style love hotels. I don't know if you guys have ever heard about those or seen pictures of them, but they're really weird. They usually have these steam rooms in of all bizarre imaginings. And so that really also captured my imagination. And the book is a lot about sex and sexual awakening and also the processing of grief, hence the bitterness of the tea in the cocktail. So I think I just became sort of fascinated with all the potential secrets and other hidden sort of things that could exist within one hotel, things, the layers of secrets, the things hidden from the guests, the things hidden from the people working there that they know that the guests don't, the things hidden from other people working there. There's a whole layer of secrecy and a sense of watchfulness that occurs in the book, a sense of observation, because hotels are like this intensely private but also intensely public place. Thinking of a sex hotel, which services this need for obviously sex, social, emotional connection, or to be alone with your loved one, there isn't a hotel that services the need for like grief or privacy. And so the Gold Persimmon is really, my first thought of it was a hotel to cry in. It's an opulent hotel, but it is a one person per room sort of situation where strange things happen as a result.
Wonderful. We have another question here. Can Lindsay talk more about how the title has evolved to become the Gold Persimmon?
Oh boy. Okay. So what was my first title for this book? I think at one point I called it Red and Gold because it was, those are two of the color themes. Not a great one. I think when I was pitching it around to agents a while ago, I called it A Little Death, a reference to death and also, sex and orgasms as a French phrase, petit mot. That's been taken by a lot of other things. So the thing about titles is you can't have a title that somebody else already snagged recently. Mm-hmm. Be, competitive. It was called Tender Violence for a while. I eventually came to not feel like super enthusiastic about that one. And for a long time, I just called it The Hotel. Or The Hotel's Book, which has a certain eeriness to it and makes a certain sense. And then The Gold Persimmon, honestly, what was partly the clincher for me about choosing that as a title is that it is the name of one of the hotels in the book, of course. And it does tap into also the use of the persimmon, which has a lot of symbolism. But also I had to think about what title one of the characters in this book might actually think of for the story. And I knew that character would choose this title for the story and would feel strongly about that. And you'll understand this more. I'm trying not to give things away. Yeah. I felt like that was what kind of the book would want. And hopefully it's, intriguing and evocative.
Definitely. Let me see. I'm toggling between Zoom and YouTube here. If we have any more questions, it doesn't look like we have any more. We have a couple of live audience members here. Do they have any questions?
I suppose one of my questions would be, how do you name your characters, and how is the main character's name spelled, and is it short for anything?
Oh, I love this question because I love names and I love naming characters. Sometimes the name just comes to me, and it might not even be a name that I particularly like, but it just fits. Other times I kind of think about it in a more symbolic way. So the character you just met here is named Clytemnestra, which is spelled Clytemnestra. Happy to text that to you later. Also, Victoria, she's called Clyde. It's a mouthful. So Clytemnestra is a figure from Greek mythology. She actually is around for the Trojan War. And what's fascinating about her is that there are competing stories about what happens with her. Long story short, her husband returns from the Trojan War, and she and her lover kill him, which is a really big no-no in the Greek world at this time. And the competing story is, did she kill him because she was this selfish, awful, evil monster and just wanted to be with her lover and have power? Or in an alternate story, she kills him because before going to war, he sacrifices her daughter to the gods for the sake of the war, and this is her revenge against that. And even though that revenge is justified in its way, it's still this terrible thing, such a terrible thing then to kill the husband, that the family is still haunted and basically cursed by this. So it's an interesting sort of character where she's kind of a composite of different elements and different archetypes of women that appear in these narratives, and even competing narratives about her that add guilt or vindicate her more, making her a really kind of complex figure that I found rather fascinating. But honestly, this name just sort of, jumped out at me. It just kind of came to me. And I sort of work that way with all the names. I just kind of have to feel out what fits for a character as I'm developing their personality. Sometimes they're just parentheses for a bit until I go back and sort of fill it in. But Clyde's name is, got a certain symbolic resonance to it.
Okay. I actually have a question. Does the other character, Edith, does that, is her name a reference to anything for you? Just because for me immediately, I thought of a bunch of references, but I'm wondering for you.
No, that's a name that that was her name. And it's not a name I particularly love, actually.
Okay.
I think what's great about her name is that it's kind of an older name that you might expect to be attached to a grandmother or someone, this younger, very cocky dyke, who's coming into Clytemnestra's life and is sexy and dangerous. So Edith is kind of a contradictory name in a way. It quite fit. It's a little stuffy, and I kind of like that about it. I like it when people's names don't match perfectly.
Right. Yeah. Oh, and wonderful. In the chat here, we have Jen has spelled out Clytemnestra.
Thank you, Jen.
Wonderful. Fascinating. Somebody says, fascinating. I love the name backstories. Well,
I have one more question.
yes, our resident guest.
One more question, just because it struck me that I did not realize, is there a particular timeline or year that this is happening
Good
in?
point. I imagined it in modern times, but
I did as well, but
not.
And only because saying Edith is like a name that you would associate with someone older,
Right.
which means that this was taking place like in the early 1900s. Edith would be a not popular name,
modern,
but a more modern name.
That's a good question. It's modern times. They have cell phones.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I messed with that.
Haven't gotten there yet. They just haven't gotten
Listening.
Excellent. Oh, we have another comment and question. I'd love to know more about Duke. He seems very gruff and not sensual, which feels very different than everything else happening in the story.
Yes, very true. Very true. Yeah, Duke does not play a huge role, but he is the manager of the hotel, and yeah, he is a gruff guy. He is not smooth, sleek, polished at all, and he is very much at odds with the way that Clytemnestra perceives the hotel and with her experience of the hotel. And that's a little bit of a hint about that. It's a question of perception, I would say.
Okay.
Things are not always as they seem.
Wonderful. It doesn't look like we have many more questions here, Lindsay. Do you have anything else to add? Anything you would like to mention to your loyal audience?
I just want to say thank you guys so much for being here. This is really fun, and it's really awesome to be able to share a part of my book with you. Again, it will be coming out next fall from Creature Publishing, but pre-orders will be available before then, and I will let you all know about that. And also, please remember to support the series and donate if you can to keep this going and help artists like me continue to do things like this.
Oh, we do have a question about the pre-order, Lindsay. Where will we be able to get the pre-order? Is that info coming soon, or?
It will take some time. If you're interested to know where we are with the process, I'm almost done with the last round of edits on the manuscript, and then it's going to actually get fitted to be printed, and all of that takes quite a bit of time. The best place to buy pre-orders is from the publisher themselves. Okay. Creature Publishing is the name. Jen, if you could type that into the chat for people. In fact, here's a great note. Even though you can always order books from different sites, the best thing to do for small presses especially is to order the books directly from the presses themselves. This book will be on Amazon, but order from the press itself. Give your money to the small presses, not to the big heartless giants that we are all depending on. Order from small presses. Buy small press books. They're really amazing, and you'll find interesting variety of literature.
Wonderful. And do you have maybe a website or an Instagram you can direct people towards? What would you prefer?
If you'd like to see a lot more of my cocktails and what I'm reading, check out Pick Your Potions at Instagram. My website is lmarabaum.com. I'm also hoping Jen will type both of these into the chat. Yeah, check it out. And I strongly recommend following me on Instagram for more about books and cocktails and all that. And there'll be more on my website soon about this book.
Wonderful. Great, Lindsay. So just a final shout out to everybody watching to donate if you feel moved to support Lindsay this evening. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm very much enjoying my cocktail. Jen typed your Instagram name into the chat. And for those of you who have friends or family who might have wanted to tune in but were unable, this link will be archived on YouTube, so you'll be able to listen to Lindsay later on at your convenience. And with that, we will bid you all good night, and thank you again for tuning in to the Vernon Salon series. So thanks and take care.